Good evening, everyone, and welcome to lesson number 6 of My God, Our Relationship. So we made it to the last class, and I certainly hope that throughout these past 5 weeks that your knowledge and appreciation and awareness about God has expanded greatly. Tonight, the last few questions are all going to focus about our relationship with God. Question number 1. Why can't we see God? Question number 2, can we reconcile God with science? Question number 3, why is Judaism so obsessed with idolatry? Is God jealous? And question number 4, why do I need to follow the Torah to have a relationship with God? So we begin with question number 1. Why can't we see God? There's an expression, seeing is believing. If God wants us to believe in him, if God wants us to act on that belief and live a life of Torah and mitzvahs, wouldn't the easiest way for God to accomplish that? Reveal himself to us. Let us see him. What could possibly be more convincing than a divine revelation to each and every person? Belief, action, we're all set. Now, let's say that I can make that happen, right? I can arrange a divine revelation for you. What would it look like to see God? What is it that you're expecting? What is it that you're hoping for? What do you imagine that such a vision like that is going to actually look like? The Rambam writes about it. Go to text number 1. This is on page 173 in your book. This is the third principle in the negation of God possessing corporeality. We believe that the one God of whom we speak is neither a body nor a bodily faculty. All activity that transpires with the body, such as motion, rest, or lodging, does not relate to him, neither in his essence nor to his doings. So the Rambam says very clearly that the third principle in the negation of God possessing corporeality. What does that mean on a practical level? We got a big problem. You would like to see God. However, God has no body. God has nothing that is physical. Therefore, there's nothing to see. Very simply, I was going to say black and white, but it's in red. God is not physical. The notion of seeing him is absolutely nonsensical. God is not the type of thing that can be seen. For example, can you smell a thought? It's not possible. You're applying a sense to something that cannot be sensed in that manner. In the same way, God cannot be seen. Yes, Mitchell, you had a question?
I'll put you on this rock and you see my back.
Oh, we'll get there. That's a fabulous question. And we'll get there in just a moment. But I want to make this point clear. Imagine right now at this second, as we're all sitting here, the roof of the shul opened, split wide to the right, to the left, and we saw the heavens. The clouds parted, the darkness disappeared, and a Zeus-like figure descended from the sky, flowing white beard, handsome, strong, and makes an announcement, I am God. From a Jewish perspective, one thing we know for sure, it is not God, it cannot be God, because God cannot be perceived by the physical eyes. God is not of the type of thing or substance that can be seen. The Torah makes this absolutely clear, so we know that it is absolutely not possible. But maybe there's another way that we can see God, right? Maybe there's another way. If you look up the word see, one definition is to perceive by the eye, but another definition is to perceive or detect as if by sight. That means the concept of seeing isn't only physical. That means there is a perception that we can have of God that is akin to, that is similar to, that is of the same style as seeing. So if that's the case, we can't see God in a physical sense, why can't we perceive God? Right? Why can't we have an experience that is so similar to seeing God that we could articulate that expression? As Mitchell mentioned before, many people have seen God, or at least that's the way the Torah describes it. We'll go to text number 3a, text number 3b in the textbook, page 176. Text number 3a says, a human king arrives in a province, accompanied by his inner circle, warriors riding at his side, and he is preceded and followed by legions of soldiers. Yet, because he is human, like all others, everyone asks, which one of the king, right? Which one of these guys on the horses are the king? However, when God was revealed at the Red Sea, there was no need for anyone to ask, which one is the king? When they saw him, they recognized him, and they all proclaimed, this is my God, and I will glorify him. So we have the Torah telling us that the Jewish people had something akin to sight. They perceived God in such a concrete way that the Jewish people said, this is my God. Biblical story number 1. Biblical story number 2. Text number 3b. God said to Moshe, tell the children of Israel, you have seen that I spoke with you from the heavens. So I just put 2 of dozens of texts in the Torah where we see that many people have seen God, the entire Jewish nation, at the splitting of the Red Sea, as well as at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. The word that the Torah uses is the Jewish people saw. And again, I explained before, it doesn't mean literal physical sight. That's not possible. But they had an experience so real that you would describe it as sight. But this experience was not only limited to many people have seen God in terms of mass revelation. We also have individuals who experienced God. We have the prophets of the Torah, right? There are the 48 prophets that we have in the biblical text. But as I mentioned before, the Talmud says that in the era of prophecy, there was 1.2 million prophets. 600,000 men, 600,000 women. A person was able to work on themselves, develop themselves to the extent that they're able to see the spiritual. There was some concrete experience that they had with God as prophets that you could describe as sight. Let's go to text number 4 from the Tanya, page 178. So the Alter Rebbe writes in the Tanya, Moshe and the other prophets apprehended God with what Scripture refers to as actual vision. For example, you shall see my back, the exact quote that you mentioned before, and I saw God from Isaiah, and God appeared to Abraham from Genesis. Now, clearly the expression of seeing is meant in a metaphorical sense and does not refer to literal sight by the physical eye. Nevertheless, the analog needs to resemble the analogy. Prophetic vision must be a form of grasping the essence of a certain spiritual reality, as sight enables us to see the essence of a physical thing. Thus, Onkelos translates Abraham's encounter mentioned above as God became revealed to him, meaning that God who is hidden became manifest and revealed to Abraham. So clearly, we have this principle where you are able to perceive God in such a way that it would be compared to sight. If that's the case, why can't we see God? Clearly, it's been done in the past. Why can't we see God today? Now, Jews like to respond to a question with a question. Why do Jews like to do that? Why not? Right? That's a classic. Okay. Here's the question. Why do you want to see God? What do you hope is going to be accomplished? I would think that the answer you would give is, why would I want to see God? It would greatly, strongly enhance my belief. It would solidify it. It would make it more concrete. Seeing God would help and aid and give a boost to my belief in God, which would then, of course, translate into commitment and observance and a Torah lifestyle. But would it? Is that true? We would like to think that's the case. Yet in the two mass revelations that we said before, we had the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, mass revelation. Every man, woman, and child saw God to the extent that they said, "This is my God and I will glorify him." What happened 40 days later? 40 days later, the Jews worship the golden calf. The Jewish people worship the golden calf. But they saw God. They experienced God. In the most real way, they pointed out, "This is my God." Yet, that fact did not help them or prevent them from committing the worst possible sin, idol worship, adultery from a spiritual perspective. In Shul, we read the story of the splitting of the Red Sea. We stand. The song Az Yashir is recited. It's poetic. It's beautiful. We all stand to honor and recognize and remember what took place at that time. Every man, woman, and child experienced God. It says that what a non-Jewish maidservant was able to see at the splitting of the Red Sea, the greatest prophets weren't able to see during their prophecies. Yet there's something so strange. We're standing up in Shul for the Az Yashir. The Aliyah does not end with the song. It continues on for one more paragraph. The Jewish people complaining about the food. How is it possible? Yes, they experienced the water is bitter, doesn't taste good. I mean, the Jews experienced the greatest revelation of God, and all they could think about is their next meal. Why? Because seeing doesn't guarantee belief. As much as we would like to think that's the case, that's not the reality. It doesn't happen. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explains it so beautifully and very simply. He says, God changes nature, creates miracles, but he does not change human nature. It's a very simple thing. Seeing does not guarantee belief. Revelation does not change us. Revelation that is initiated by God. If right now we saw a miracle take place in this very room, the floor split and dolphins were jumping and flipping in the air right now, it would not have an impact. Why? Because it doesn't change us. We did not become different people. We did not look at the world now from a different perspective and from a different angle. We're the same people that we were before, with our same laziness, with our same jealousy, with our same anger, with all of the faults that we have, all the shortcomings we have. Yeah, we saw something pretty cool, but we did not change. Therefore, it is not going to last. At the moment, it might be inspiring. For a week, maybe you're going to be on fire with belief, trust in God, with observance in God. But after time, ultimately, it disappears. When the sun shines into a room, does the room become bright? Absolutely. It's bright, it's illuminated with light. However, when the sun sets, the room becomes dark again. Right? The inspiration, the light moves on, and we're back to exactly who we were before. Real change does not come from a revelation. It comes from within. It takes work. It takes effort. You have to change the way that you naturally think about things. You have to work on the thoughts that pop into your head. You have to look at the world with a completely, totally different perspective. That is something that's going to last. And you know what? Right? It works so much better. It is so much more impactful. And as the Rebbe Rayatz writes, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he writes that change from within is so much more valuable. It's cherished. And you accomplish so much more. Real change happens when it's triggered from within. Let's go to text number 5. It's a really beautiful Hayom Yom. This is text number 5b. It says, we must serve God by our own efforts. Our service is higher when we are led by the hand from above. But it's more precious when it's generated by our own efforts. When we did the work ourselves, it's more real, it's more lasting, it's more valuable, it's more precious. This is why God generally doesn't allow himself to be seen because it doesn't work. It doesn't help, right? We had 1,000 years of divine revelation and prophecy and a temple. And you know what? We worshiped idols and it was destroyed and it was burned down. It doesn't last. There's a fabulous story, I'm sure all of you have heard it before, about the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was a child and he learned the Torah portion of Vayera. God appeared to Avram and he comes home to his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he says, how come God did not appear to me? And the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, when a Jew, a tzaddik, at the age of 99, realizes there's still more to do, there's work that has to be done, right? Needs a circumcision. That is a person who merits and deserves that God should reveal himself to him. That person earned the revelation. That's ultimately what it's all about. Real, lasting effect and impact, it's only going to be the product of our work. But this leads to a pretty important question. If revelation doesn't last, what was the point of Mount Sinai? You could even argue God made himself look stupid, although that might not be the appropriate language, because he revealed himself to the Jewish people. 40 days later, they're sitting at the golden calf. What was the point of it if ultimately it doesn't work? So perhaps the answer is that God was showing to the Jewish people that it's a real thing. The concept of revelation to mankind, God communicating to us, it can actually happen. It's a real thing. And if you work on it, it's possible. We have the era of prophecy, 1.2 million people, 600,000 men, 600,000 women. God showed the Jewish people at Mount Sinai and ultimately showed all of us prophecy, revelation of God is a reality that can happen. You need to work on it, change your perspective, make the spiritual real, make the physical secondary, and prophecy can actually happen. However, the era of prophecy, for all intents and purposes, is over. Right? We don't have the ability to experience that like we did then. We lost it. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. However, we are still told by God that if we work hard, we still can see God in the world. How? We talked about it a few classes ago. Hashgacha pratis, divine providence. God organizes our life, the people that we meet, the events that take place. All the circumstances of our life are orchestrated by God. And if we work hard, we can see the hand and feel the presence of God in our life in a very concrete way. And what is going to be the result of our work? The result of our work is going to be Mashiach. Mashiach is coming. What are we told about the era of Mashiach? If you go to text number 6, the prophet Isaiah, right? The prophet Yeshayahu, what does he write? He says, the glory of God will be revealed, and together all of humanity will see that the mouth of God has spoken. So what is going to happen when Mashiach comes? The glory of God will be revealed. But is it going to be wasted? Is it not going to last? Is it going to dissipate? No. Why? Soon we will reach a time we will see God and internalize the revelation. Why will it work when Mashiach comes? Because it's the result of 2,000 years of work. 2,000 years of Jews committed to God, a stiff-necked people, as we mentioned earlier. 2,000 years of exile without that divine revelation, without that prophecy, and we are still here. When Mashiach comes and we're able to experience that, we'll have earned it, and then we'll see and we'll be able to internalize that. Principle number 22. Why can't we see God? God can't be seen because he wants us to find him. And ultimately, that is real. But let's go to question number 2. Can we reconcile God with science? So there was a zookeeper who walked into the gorilla display in the zoo, and he sees the gorilla's got 2 books. He has a copy of a book by Darwin, The Origin of the Species, and he's got a Chumash, he's got a Torah. So the zookeeper comes over to him and says, what on earth are you doing with these 2 books? So the gorilla says, I'm trying to figure something out. Am I my brother's keeper, or am I my keeper's brother? That's another classic. So we're 2 for 2, I think, so far with classic jokes here. The perception is that there is a divide between science and religion. There's a battle between them. They contradict each other. There's a fight between the two, right? That is the perception. And there are 2 elements that are perhaps behind this way of thinking. 2 questions. Question number 1 is, do we need God? Years ago, we did not know much. So you looked at the world. There were so many misunderstood, so many unexplained phenomena that's happening. So we had to resort to, it must be there is a God who is running, controlling, operating, and making these things happen. But at this point, we have enough scientific explanation, understanding, answers as to how the world runs. We don't need to say it's God. We can explain this happens because of A factor, B factor, C factor, and so on. So this is a huge issue. Do we need God at all when we have science to answer so many of the questions? Another question here is, where is the evidence? Science is evidence-based. That's how science works. You study something, you learn about it, you measure it, you have a hypothesis, you test it. Everything in science is supposed to be evidence-based. But religion is not evidence-based, right? Belief, almost by definition, has nothing to do with evidence. Evidence is not relevant. Is it possible for a scientist to believe? A person who views the world from a scientific perspective, hypothesis, testing, evidence, proof. How can a scientist even speak the language of belief? It would seem to be a contradiction in terms. Now, tonight we have a very limited time to explore this issue, right? We cannot give a comprehensive answer. This would require an entire course in and of itself that probably would have to last well more than 6 lessons. So what are we going to try to do tonight? Give you a few points to ponder, a new perspective, perhaps a different way of looking at things that will help a little bit. So first, we're going to address the question of, do we need God? And the answer is, of course, absolutely yes, we do. There's a very interesting text here from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I'm not going to read the whole text, but an argument that he makes in the text is, the meaning of the system lies outside the system. What does that mean? He gives an example. Imagine if you take a person from another planet, okay, for the sake of the argument, does not know Earth, how we operate, how we function. Put him outside of an ATM machine. And he sits there for 24 hours. And he watches people come up to the ATM machine, put in a card, type in some numbers, and money comes out. Is it possible for this person, seeing this for the first time, to have any understanding of what's happening? They could sit there for 24 hours, for a week, for 2 weeks, until they really get the hang of what is taking place and what's happening. But do they know what money is? Do they know what it's used for? Do they know where money comes from? Do they know what the money represents? Do they know why people value it? Do they know how the money comes into the bank? They don't know anything. All you can know is that which you see with your own eyes. You can only see the inner workings of the system. But the meaning of the system has to come from outside of the system. In other words, science explains what is. God, religion, explains why it is. A completely different argument. Scientists are great at understanding how things work, but not why. When it comes to meaning, when it comes to purpose, when it comes to values, science does not and cannot have anything to say on the issue.
Science and religion. Throughout the centuries, practitioners of both have clashed over perceived contradictions. But is there another way? One in which science and religion are not in competition for ultimate truth? Let's begin with a poem, Binging by Dr. Seuss. I can watch that show some other day, I thought I'd say. I have plenty of time to watch that show, I thought I'd go. I can take a break right now, I thought I'd vow. But then I thought, but then I thought, but then I thought, why not watch that show right now? Of course, Theodore Seuss Geisel never lived to see the dawn of binge watching. This plausible fabrication was created in under 3 seconds by an artificial intelligence called GPT-3 at the prompting of a New Yorker magazine staff writer who asked the AI to write a Dr. Seuss poem about binge-watching Netflix.
I would say that it is a general purpose language tool. So you can give it a problem statement or you can give it what we call a prompt. All of what it's doing is looking at a sequence of words basically and trying to predict the ones that should come next. But to do that well, it has to sort of understand the structure and what a human would think would come next. It's trained on looking at lots of text and predicting what would come next.
The next time the topic of AI comes up over dinner, you can explain how, in response to write a joke about a rabbi giving a sermon on Shabbat, GPT-3 can calmly spit out, because it was the day of rest. But knowing how something works is only half the equation. There is an entirely different set of questions that need to be answered before you begin prodding the robot, such as, why are you turning to AI? Are you writing speaker bios or blog posts? Do you want to simplify and summarize a complex text for third graders? Or are you trying to generate new, creative app ideas? Knowing how the text is processed and then predicted does not help you answer any of these questions. Technical knowledge will not help you generate a good prompt. Here's how the late Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks put it.
Science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts things together to see what they mean. And we need them both, the way we need the 2 hemispheres of the brain. One way of seeing the difference is to think about their relationship with time. Science looks for causes of events, and a cause always comes before its effect. How did the window break? Because I threw a stone at it. First came the throwing of the stone, then came the breaking of the window. Science looks back from effect to cause. However, human action is always looking forward. Why did I throw the stone? Because I wanted to wake someone who was asleep to warn them that the building next door is on fire. An action always seeks to bring about something in the future.
Science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts things together to see what they mean. Science may tell us how this universe works, but only divine wisdom and creativity can prompt us to write a life story filled with joy, creativity, purpose, and meaning.
So, do we need God? Absolutely. Science can tell us what something is and how it works, but it is only going to be religion, God, that can explore what's the meaning, what's the value, and what's the purpose. So where is the evidence, right? This would appear to be a major problem for a scientist because the scientific way of thinking is based on the evidence. However, it's not necessarily a problem. Why? Because science and religion are 2 different disciplines which use 2 different tools. God created the laws of nature. Obviously, a different system is needed to explore God. You can only use science to explore that which is in nature. But if you want to talk about God, we're talking about a completely different set of tools that are completely outside the system. Let's go to text number 8, scientist Francis Collins. This is on page 184. In my view, there is no conflict in being a rigorous scientist and a person who believes in God, who takes a personal interest in each one of us. Science's domain is to explore nature. God's domain is in the spiritual world, a realm not possible to explore with the tools and language of science. It must be examined with the heart, the mind, and the soul. And the mind must find a way to embrace both realms. The God of the Bible is also the God of the genome. He can be worshipped in the cathedral or in the laboratory. His creation is majestic, awesome, intricate, and beautiful, and it cannot be at war with itself. Only we humans can start such battles, and only we can end them. I actually think that it can be argued that the believer's faith is actually enhanced by science. When you look at the world from the perspective of science, you are amazed, you are blown away by the beauty, the precision, the magnitude, the size of the universe. It puts you in a position of awe at what it is that God was able to build and to create. Rav Kook writes this beautifully in text number 9. Rav Kook says, with a recognition of existence comes an enduring recognition of and reverence for God. The persistence of natural law tells of the wisdom and the greatness of the Creator. In the words of the prophets, lift up your eyes and see who created these. In that sense, the prophets are telling us, look at nature. Look at the world. The more you know, the more you understand about the world, the more amazed you are going to be about God. Therefore, it is fitting for every wise-hearted person to draw water of reverence from the precious spring of existence, for it all expresses honor to its creator. And this is what the first section of davening is about. The first section of davening, which we recite every single day, is called Psukei de Zimra, verses of praise. The theme is nature. Look at the world, how amazing, how beautiful, how intricate it is, and how God runs all of it. When you introduce science into the discussion, it's Psukei de Zimra on steroids. When we observe the magnitude of creation, our relationship with the Creator is enhanced. It heightens our awareness and our experience and our appreciation for Psukei de Zimra and of our appreciation for God in a tremendous way. It's another interesting point that is made by another scientist, Robert Jastrow. And he says, no matter how much you know, we recognize there's so much more that we don't know, especially when it comes to morals, values, meaning, and purpose. Let's go to text number 10, which is on page 186. Robert Jastrow, he writes, at this moment, it seems as though science will never be able to raise the curtain of the mysteries of creation. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peaks. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. So he makes this beautiful point that as much as you understand about the universe, there's so much that you don't. And when it comes to the whys of life, the most critical and important questions, it is only religion that has the ability to address these questions in any meaningful way. So question number 23, can we reconcile God with science? God doesn't need to be reconciled with science because science and religion are not incompatible. They are on two entirely different tracks. Let's go to question number 3. Why is Judaism so obsessed with idolatry? Is God jealous? Anyone who has opened a book of the Bible, whether it is the 5 books or whether it is the rest of the Tanakh, will see that there are many, many biblical prohibitions that relate to idolatry. There are prophets constantly warning the Jewish people against and away from idolatry. When God revealed himself to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai, the first thing he said was, I am God your God. Second statement is, you shall have no other gods before me. It was top of God's mind to warn the Jewish people about idolatry. The word for us is Jew. That's what we're called. We're called Jews. Where does the word Jew come from? Yehudi. Mordechai ha-Yehudi. The Talmud says, what does it mean to be a Yehudi? What's the definition? The Talmud says, one who repudiates idol worship. The very definition of a Jew is the one who stands against and opposite idol worship. If that's the case, clearly it's very important, this business with idol worship. But why such an obsession? Is God so jealous that he's constantly warning us about things that are getting our attention? And perhaps more importantly, how is this relevant now? Are there any attractive stone sculptures that you have an urge to worship? Do you have any desire to place your faith and trust in some type of Barbie or G.I. Joe or some type of figurine? Absolutely not. Not that I know of. So how is this relevant today, something that God spoke so much about and that his prophets warn us so much about? The reality is that idol worship is everywhere today, not just thousands of years ago. It is a part of everyday life today, and therefore the Torah has to warn us about it so carefully and so specifically. Let's go to text number 11. This is the Rambam. He gives us a very interesting insight into idol worship that we might not have anticipated. The Rambam writes that the early sages taught getting angry is tantamount to idol worship. Now, at first glance, you would say that's crazy. Idol worship is idol worship, and anger is anger. What do the two have to do with each other? But as we're going to see, when we understand what anger is, we're going to see clearly what idolatry is and how they are so connected and how relevant the warning is today. Give you a little bit of background on this statement. King David had a son. His son's name was Avshalom. Avshalom felt that he wants to rebel against his father. He actually caused a revolt with an army. Many murders took place, and King David had to run for his life. While King David was running for his life, he comes across a man named Shimi ben Gera. Shimi ben Gera sees King David. He starts cursing him. He starts throwing stones at the king. King David's lieutenant, Avishai ben Surya, wants to act. He wants to get rid of this person who's insulting and hurling stones at King David. Let's go to text number 12a, page 187, Shmuel Beis. Avishai, the son of Surya, said to the king, "Why allow this dead dog to curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head." The king responded, "What is it between me and you, sons of Surya? Let him curse, for God has told him to curse David. Who then has the right to say, 'Why have you done so?'" So let's explore the story. Shimi ben Gera, King David. Shimi ben Gera is pelting stones at King David, and he curses him. Avishai, David's lieutenant, wants to take action, as you would think is normal and natural, right? The guard, the defender of King David, is going to take action against someone who's literally cursing and committing violence against the king. What does King David say? He says, "Let him curse, for God has told him to curse." What is he saying essentially? He's saying, it's not Shimi who's cursing me. He said, God runs the world. God runs everything that takes place. It's God who's cursing me, not Shimi. Shimi is the tool that God is using at this moment to convey a message to me, a message that I need to understand. Why waste my emotions on Shimi? Why get angry at Shimi? It's not Shimi ben Gera. This is a direct message from God. If you believe that God runs the world, your reaction will not be anger. Your action cannot be anger. Because what does anger mean? Anger means it was not supposed to happen, therefore I'm angry. that's idolatry. If you believe that something happens that's not supposed to happen, that is against the will of God, that is the very definition of idolatry. If it's from God, that means it was supposed to happen. So what is anger? Anger is a denial of God and his benevolence. That is what it means. It puts the power into someone else's hands. This creates the idol. Now, this does not absolve Shimei. Shimei made the choice. He's responsible for the choice, and therefore there's consequences and a punishment. But what reaction should we have? Not anger, because anger is idolatry, because everything comes from God. The moment that we say that there is anything in the world that has power, that has control outside of God, that's idol worship. If you get angry, that's idol worship. Let's go to text number 12b, the way the Alter Rebbe explains it in Tanya. Our sages equate anger to idolatry. The reason for this is clear to those who have understanding, because at the time of anger, a person's faith in God departs. For if one believed that what happened to them was God's doing, they would not be angry at all. Granted, a person with free will cursed or struck or caused damage to the property of the victim, and for their evil choice, they are liable for punishment in a court of law, as well as in the heavenly court. Nevertheless, heaven already decreed that the incident befall the person who is harmed, and God has many agents through whom he can act. The prohibition against idolatry cuts to the very heart of Judaism. Do I believe in God and his total control over the world? If we could attribute any power to something outside of God, this is idol worship. You've all heard the story about the young man who wanted to propose to his girlfriend. He goes to his future father-in-law's house to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. They sit down on the couch, and the potential father-in-law says to the son, how do you plan on supporting my daughter? He says, don't worry, God is going to provide, right? How are you going to be able to buy a house? God is going to provide. Every question he asks, the answer is, God is going to provide. The man leaves. The wife says to her husband, "No, what did you think about this young man?" And he said, well, the bad news is he does not really have a plan for life. The good news is he thinks I'm God. Right? So if we attribute any power to anything else, that is the definition of idol worship. All right, so I'm 3 for 3 with classic jokes tonight. Okay. Principle number 24. Why is Judaism so obsessed with idolatry? Is God jealous? Placing one's trust in anything other than God's absolute control is the essence of idolatry. If we're worried about our boss, if we're worried about work, if we're worried about our self-image, whatever it is, the things in life that tend to control us, that we run after, that is called idol worship. And that is why the Torah stresses it time and time again, and why it's so relevant for us today. Question number 4. Why do I need to follow the Torah? Its laws, its rules, its regulations to have a relationship with God. You ever had a person say, I'm a spiritual person, right? I have some inner soul level connection with God. Why do I need to follow the rules and regulations? Now, this is a fabulous question to conclude the course about God. Now, just as we started the course with question number 1, what is God? And talked about Abraham's journey, we are going to conclude also with talking about Abraham's journey. So in lesson number 1, we told the story about Abraham breaking, smashing, destroying all the idols in his father's workshop. But that was really only in the middle of the story of Abraham's life. Let's go to the beginning, text number 13a, This is from the Rambam. After this mighty personage, Abraham, was weaned, he began to ponder deeply. Though he was a young child, he began to contemplate by day and night. He had no teacher, nor was there anyone to inform him. Rather, he was mired in Ur-Kasdim's population of foolish idolaters. His father, mother, and all the people around him worship idols. He would worship along with them, but his heart was busy analyzing everything, and he gained a clear understanding. Ultimately, he arrived at the true way and understood paths of righteousness through his accurate comprehension. He realized that there was one God, that he created everything, and that there is no other God among all that exists. So Abraham, right, found God on his own. He recognized that there was only one God. And he decides he is going to take on the religious establishment. He battles with his father. He destroys, he smashes all of the idols. Ultimately, right, Ultimately, he convinces tens of thousands of people of the truth. He is truly a revolutionary Jewish leader. Go to text number 13b. Abraham used his recognition and knowledge of the Creator to formulate presentations for the population of Ur-Kasdim and to debate them, informing them that they were not following the true path. When he won them over with the strength of his arguments, the king desired to execute him. His life was spared through a miracle, and he relocated to Haran. He then began a public campaign, loudly proclaiming to all humanity and informing them that in all of the universe there is but one God, and that it is appropriate to worship him alone. He traveled to publicize his message everywhere, rallying people in city after city, kingdom after kingdom. When the people would rally to him, questioning him regarding his statements, he would explain to each individual according to their understanding until he brought that individual back to the true path. Eventually, tens of thousands rallied around Abraham. They are the folk referred to in the Torah as the people of the house of Abraham, in whose hearts he firmly planted this great fundamental principle. So Abraham was incredibly successful. He impacted thousands of people. Miracles happened on his behalf. Incredibly impressive. Yet, not one word of this story, which the Rambam wrote so beautifully, appears in the biblical text. It's incredible. It's impressive. It's inspiring. Yet not one word appears. Why isn't this story in the Bible? Don't you think this information would be critical for us to know? What does the Bible tell us? It tells us that Abraham was the 10th generation from Noah. He was married to a woman named Sarai, and then God just decided to talk to him. Text number 14a from the Chumash. God said to Abram, "Go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." At this point in time, Abram was 75 years old. We are introduced to Abraham at the age of 75 with zero background information. What happened to the background story? It would be incredible to have that in the Torah. Why is it not there? The Rebbe writes, to teach us such an important, powerful message that gets at the very core of what it means to be in a relationship with God. Text number 14b, page 193 from the Rebbe. The Rebbe writes, the Torah emphasizes at the very beginning of the Jewish story and the narrative of Abraham, what makes a Jew unique. Abraham's uniqueness as a Jew and his elevated stature do not begin with his extraordinary qualities, with the closeness to God that he achieved through his own toil and efforts, but rather with God said to Abraham, "Go forth." It begins with God setting Abraham apart. Abraham's relationship with and attachment to God was established through God commanding him and his fulfillment of that command. The beginning of Abraham's life, the relationship that Abraham had with God, was the result of his own search for meaning. his thoughts, his feelings, his work, his effort. It was all about his accomplishments. When does the Torah tell us about Abraham? What is the first introduction that we have to Abraham in the Torah? It is God speaking to Abraham. It is a relationship with God that resulted from receiving God's instructions and fulfilling it. What is the Torah trying to say? God is infinite. There is no way for a human being to reach God. God is beyond. God transcends. God is infinite. Can you climb to the top of a wall that's infinite? If the wall is infinitely tall, it is impossible to get there. It's simply not going to happen. What is the only way that we can reach God? If God reaches down to us. And that's exactly what the Torah and mitzvahs are. This is the magic of a mitzvah. It is the medium through which we can share a real relationship with God. Any spirituality that we claim to have on our own that is outside of Torah and mitzvahs, that is climbing up an infinite wall. We will not ever get there. However, through Torah and mitzvahs, what is Torah and mitzvahs? The rules and the regulations of Torah and mitzvahs, that is God giving us that ladder that we can climb over that wall to bridge that gap and connect to God in the most real and true intimate level. Principle number 25. Why do I need to follow the Torah to have a relationship with God? Because doing a mitzvah allows us to accomplish that which is not possible to achieve through human effort. It connects us with God. I want to conclude the course with two stories. Story number one takes place with Rabbi Meir Shapiro. He was the founder of the famous Chachmei Lublin Yeshiva. He was the founder of the Daf Yomi program. And he had to fundraise for his yeshiva. So he traveled around the world raising money. Wherever he would go, he would give a lecture and he would accept donations. One particular place he travels, he gives a very deep, very intricate, very sophisticated lecture on the Talmud. And a person comes over to him after the lecture and says, Rabbi, I did not understand one word that you said, but here is a check for your yeshiva. The rabbi said to him, I think you're the only one who actually understood what I was trying to say. Right? What did he mean by that? And how does that relate to the class? Right? We came to this class. We asked a lot of questions, and I certainly hope that you got a lot of answers to your questions. But what's the most important thing? Action. The most important thing is that you take what you heard, what you learned, and try to apply it to your life, and it should bring you to action, to Torah, to mitzvahs in a clear, practical, and concrete way. Learning is great. Asking questions, getting answers, great. But if it doesn't lead to action, what was the point of it all? Story number two. The great Hasidic Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kutsk. A young man travels to Kutsk. He says, I want to be part of your community. I want to be part of your shul. I want to be part of your Hasidic group. The Kutsk Rebbe says, why? Why'd you come here? And he says, I seek God. The Kutsk Rebbe laughs. God is everywhere, right? You could seek God and find him in your town, in your city, in your community. Why'd you come here? So this Chassid is confused. And he says to the Rebbe, well, why do people come here? I don't know, why do people come? And the Kutsk Rebbe responded, they come to find themselves. That's why they come here. So everyone here who came to the class, right, you're hoping to find God, right? That's what the class is about, my God. But I'm hoping that through the process, you were able to also learn and find out about yourselves. How much we matter to God, how precious, how valuable we are to God, how much our actions, our behaviors, our mitzvahs mean to God, and that should ultimately translate into real, concrete actions.
Lesson 6. Our relationship. 1. We cannot see God with our physical eyes because he is not physical and has no form. 2. We are unable to perceive God because he wants us to put in our own effort to find him. When we find God through our own efforts, the experience is transformative and enduring. 3. Science and religion aren't at odds with each other because they run on two different tracks. The former explains the what of creation. The latter provides the why. 4. God controls everything. Assuming that anything other than God has control over one's life or the world around us is a form of idolatry. 5. The mitzvot are God's way of reaching out to us and allowing us to enter into a relationship with him, something that is impossible for finite humans to do on their own.
So first I want to remind everyone, the textbook is so incredibly valuable. There's more resources at the end of every lesson. Please utilize it, look at it. I know in the past, at the conclusion of a JLI course, some people are like, what do I do with this book? But I hope that you will treasure and value this book for the wealth of information that's in it. You can always go to myjli.com, right, / what is it? I think we have it over here, my God, right, for more learning as well. The next JLI course that's coming up, it's going to be starting, I think it's February 1st. It's the first Wednesday in February. It's called Book Smart. Course through Judaism's most important titles and the authors who inscribe them. What we're going to be doing in this course is looking at the different categories of Torah, Medrash, Zohar, Talmud, Mishnah, Chassidus. What are all of these different dimensions with Judaism? How do they work? How do they function? What style teachings do they try to communicate? And what are the most important books that we should know about? So it's called Book Smart. We're going to do a fabulous tour on all the different types and categories of Jewish learning, become familiar with the books and their style, and broaden our knowledge, awareness, and appreciation of the Torah. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the class. I hope that you gained from learning it and participating in it as much as I gained from teaching it and being with you throughout the course. Have a fabulous night, and I look forward to seeing you next time. All right.